Sutterby is a hamlet in the East Lindsey district of Lincolnshire, England. It is situated 9 miles, about 14 kilometres, south-east from Louth and 8 miles 13 kilometres east from Horncastle. Sutterby is in the civil parish of Langton by Spilsby. The first recorded mention of Sutterby is in the Domesday Book. The by at the end of its name indicates this place may originally have been a Viking settlement. The village is located within the area of the Danelaw. It's questionable, but possible, that in 1912 Hugh Wells, Bishop of Lincoln, granted the church at Sutterby to the Benedictine nuns of the Priory of Chester. It seems that the nuns have lost it, however, by the time the dissolution of the monasteries. But as I say, this isn't confirmed. St John the Baptist Church, Sutterby, is now a redundant Anglican church in the village of Sutterby, Lincolnshire, England. It is designated by English Heritage as a Grade II listed building and is under the care of the Friends of Friendless Churches. The church dates from the 12th century, with additions in the 14th century. A south porch was added in 1743. It was declared redundant by the Diocese of Lincoln in August 1972 and gifted as a monument in March 1981. It was taken into the care of the charity, the Friends of Friendless Churches, who has held the freehold from the 3rd of July 1981. A very interesting group of local enthusiasts have taken the Sutterby Church on and have started exploring all of its potential and past history, doing minor excavations and looking into not only the architecture and the previous history of it, but also the wildlife and natural history around it and its surroundings. I was invited to come in as another activity and do a watercolour workshop there. A delightful couple, Jeff and Denise Wheatley, invited me to do this, and we managed to gain 15 students for this workshop. I give my sincere thanks here for their great help and energy in doing this. Okay, let's take a look at the surrounding area of this beautiful area of the Lincolnshire Wolds. So we've got this beautiful landscape out here, and I'm going to paint the cornfield in here, and the distant hills across here, a few trees here, and close up, so we've got foreground, middle, distance, very loosely in about half an hour, just before the class comes. We've got a workshop here today at Sutterby Church, so before the class arrives I just want to do one little watercolour of this view. It was beautiful 20 minutes ago, and now all the clouds are coming over. Hopefully they're going to clear again later, but it's not ideal for me because it's gone very soft and dark now, whereas I had beautiful light shining across it before. But let's just see what we can do. So we've got the hills over there, and then this lovely cornfield comes down in an arc across here, all the way down to here, and then we've got a little bundle of trees, a lovely tree that comes up there, another tree that comes up behind it here, big, and one that comes in front, which is hard to see because the light has gone so flat now. Here we've got a load of nettles and foreground, some rubbish and stuff, and nettles going up here, and then back here these various little hills, distance pieces I'm going to try and pick up on. So quite quickly then, I want to take a big wash brush, and I'll good morning, and I'll do a quick sky because I've got just about 3/4 of an hour before the class comes, so we'll just try and do a quickie for myself before everybody else arrives, even though the light's got very low now. I'm going to start with some raw sienna because the sky is fairly dark, and just get a wash of that in first of all, letting a bit of dry brushwork happen. We're using a £300 rough here, which is rather fun. So I'm going to gently add colours into that. Into the distance, I'll get this wet in wet feel of the day, and the gentle greys. It is a very gentle sort of grey day at the moment. A little bit more blue into the background there, so cerulean blue now into my raw sienna, which is a nice gentle and in fact slightly transparent blue. There's a little bit more blue going on higher up there, so I'm just going to drop a little bit of blue into here. I'm going to take a little bit of cobalt blue now, let's put a little bit of sunshine up there, there's a bit going on, and then we'll drop in some greys in a moment. Let's say now we'll take some ultramarine and a little touch of burnt sienna to make a nice warm grey, which we can drop in up here in places, just to get the feel of these soft morning clouds. It's now coming up 9:45, and we're getting organised gradually. Now as the water dries, it won't flow as much down the paper, and this will get harder and harder, the painting that is, in consistency, so the edges will become harder and harder. I'm going to make a bit more warmth now, go a little bit darker up here, because some of these clouds up here are quite nice, and as it dries it's not going to flow as much down the paper, so we're just getting these layers of cloud going back here to the distance. As I say, it's quite a sort of grey soft light at the moment. Now that'll do for that one. That's got our sky going. Now let's go to the distance here, and straight away I want to work up just a soft green grey there, a little bit of viridian, and I'm going to go all the way along and let the sky just drop into it, because it's such a misty grey sort of day over there. I can let that sky drop into there and right down through here. Then I want my working downwards, I want some slightly yellower green, so I'm going to take some sap green and a little bit of chrome yellow and just work my way along this field here with that, because we've got quite a dark day, as I was saying, all the way along there to here. Next we want to get in start to get in these trees here, so while it's still wet, let's work in the same colour through here, just to give an underpainting. And I want it a lot lighter up here where these greens are, so I'm going to take the plain sap green and just drop it in here where this tree is for the moment, even a bit of white paper showing through. Then down to my Viridian, which is a much greener, a bluer green. I'll go all the way along here with it. You see the sky is drying out quite nicely, so I want to go back into that sky in a moment. I'm going to bring some of those grasses and bits of nettle up through here. We'll drop wet into there in just a minute. So let's just soak that off, that line off there, and we'll drop a little bit more Viridian into that, Viridian green into that, just to make it a little bit greener in places. There we go. Let's go back up to our sky, where we had those lovely greys going. And I'm going to drop back in slightly darker cloud up here, because now it's disappeared a lot as it's run down into this area here and through, just to make the sky a bit stronger, right up and through there into the blues. There's a line of that dark coming all the way along here, little layers of it right back into the distance there. It comes up through. So there's our sky now, coming up off the paper. Now back down to here again. Let's start to get these rather dull but nice bits of the cornfield. So some raw sienna again, right the way across here. And that's got our basic washes in. Now while I'm using that raw sienna, I can drop a bit of it into this wet green here to start to give my effect of the foreground, with these grasses and things coming in all through here and letting it come through the back of the trees a bit there as well. And it's into the distance here as well, so over the top of this green field there's a little bit of this raw sienna coming through over here. Lovely colours in the background, and as that gets drier I'll be able to drop in more colour into that. So I'm going to take some of that raw sienna and a little touch of the burnt sienna, and I can start to drop in some of the lines of where the corn has fallen and let those go wet into wet down there as well. And I want a little bit more of a purple colour into it, so now I'm going to take some cobalt violet, which is a lovely colour, and just drop some of that cobalt violet along the top edge here, just to get a little bit more colour going into the corns. And again we'll let that dry down a bit. Now coming back to the trees over here, the softer trees in the background, let's have a look back here. Now it's starting to dry, it's still a bit too wet at the minute, but I'm going to put some more colours over there in just a moment. Just bring a few hints of cobalt violet and lighter colours there. Now I want to look at these trees here. As I say, it's very wet yet. It's a very damp sort of day at the moment. It isn't ideal. We'd like a bit more sunshine to really get this going. I'm using some Prussian blue now and burnt sienna and a little bit of the raw sienna to give it a slightly greener tint. A little bit of sap green to that. I want some quite dark greens going back here against this there we go. Let those spread out, come down right down to here. Up and through the background here. A bit more blue into that. Right up through there. Still want to go dark into those clouds a bit yet. They've dropped down a bit more than they should at the moment. And I'm going to come in with some of these darks into the edges of the tree here, down and through into the nettles at the bottom. Very much wet into wet at the moment. And let this colour we're doing a bit more green into it. Come down into the tree, a bit more sap green, and we'll start to drop in the darks inside this tree, and right down to here amongst all these grasses. You see we're getting hard edges there where the paint's dried off now, I'm still doing wet into wet to keep the softness going in the rest of it. Nettles coming up here. We'll come back into detail, much more detail as we get on with the painting, but it's playing light against darks at the moment. There we go. Now back into the distance here. It's just beginning to dry a little, so I'm just going to start to indicate some of the trees that are going on to the background here. I'll make some of those hard edged, and we'll make some of them soft edged, and we'll leave lights in between so that the tips of the trees are just showing here. You get the feeling of this, these distant trees and hills right back here. A bit more blue now. I'm going to take some cobalt blue and start to drop some of these trees in with the cobalt blue. I get this feeling of distance. Little tips of trees just tickling along the horizon there on this misty day. And then I'm going to try some cerulean. Go a bit bluer still right back here, cerulean blue. We're way back into the distance. We've got the cooler blues and the warmer blues. I think the feeling of these trees gradually coming forward. Down into here, as they get much stronger here. If we make them stronger here, then it'll push the ones in the background back further. It's like the rough against the smooth, the warm against the cool, light against dark. Now back up to my sky, where I want to go back and still put some more grey in yet. Still not quite what I want. So I'm going to, it's a little bit harder edge now, so I just want a bit more cloud going on to some of these areas here. And you see it's dried off a lot more now, so we don't get the soft edges unless I come back with my water and deliberately blend it in with the water. You see how I do that? So we've got hard edges to it as well as soft edges. Now let's come back into these and darken those a bit more. Still a little bit wet, so we can drop these colours in quite nicely. We're getting slightly harder edges now as the paint dries. Want a softer edge, then put some water in and just let it soften in. Coming down to the warmer pieces here now, it's getting stronger, so we're going to get stronger with our colour as well. It's darker under here. Very grey day. It's a pity because I'd rather be painting this in bright sunlight, but there we go. This is painting in reality, this is painting on plein air as it really is out here. I'm not cheating in the studio or actually out here painting real life. Gradually building up these darks over the top, and now it's becoming drier. You can see I can start to put in more details on the edges of these plants and nettles. I don't even need to change brushes yet. I can just keep with this little brush and flick in all of these little details here to start to give the idea of foreground. I even felt a little bit of rain then, which is not what we want today. And these nettle leaves that come down in a series of angles like that, which are rather fun. So how quickly we can produce a little study. Let's go stronger still with these trees back here. Gradually darkening down. Adding deeper colours to the foreground trees to make them appear in layers. Dark up behind here again. And we're starting to see the effects of these lovely effects of the distance we can get. And become a bit warmer with some of these lovely warms that are a little bit of green into that warm. Into the corn here as it comes through, and a little bit of rain appearing. We don't want that because it only takes a few spots of rain on a watercolour to ruin it. We don't really want that happening as it did in Scotland recently. So, a soft grey day, medium light. Let's just soften some of these edges a little bit here. Soften those in, blend them in. Now I want a much warmer green, so I'm going to take my sap green and add some burnt sienna to it. Warmer green in the foreground here. This lovely tree coming up. Coming out there into the field. Gradually then we can build up these textures, bring this thing forward. The warmer it is in the foreground, the cooler those colours in the background are going to look. Quickly then, I'll say it again, but how quickly we can build up a painting just by an impressionist style. Grasses and things here. And we're almost done with this painting. I mean, for what I just want to do is a quick study just to show you how it works. It doesn't need a lot more. Glue into it, these distant trees, and we'll get those little bits of dark branches going up into the background there. Morning, Mike. Morning. I'll have done 2 or 3 before you've got here, mate. Now we're going much stronger, so some Prussian blue and some burnt sienna.
Do we want to stop inside?
Yes, it'd be better, because I don't know what this weather's doing, but I thought it was lovely when I came, but it's suddenly kind of a bit nastier. So much stronger just here in the foreground. Bring out these layers of leaves a bit more. Building it up bit by bit. So there's our study. I don't think we need to do much more on that. We'll probably just put a little bit more warmth. There's a little bit of burnt sienna and red just going on into the tree here. And berries, just to bring that forward a bit. Maybe a little bit of purple.
Let's take it out here.
Yeah, we had sunshine earlier on, and it's hopefully for later on again, but at the moment it's
I don't think I want it there, thank you.
Now I'm going to use a little bit of opaque colour, a little bit of chrome. Just dropping a bit of chrome on the edges here of these leaves, just to get a bit more yellow in the foreground on my tree here. Just to bring that forward of these trees in the background. Look, and that's what it's done. A bit more yellow down here as well into this. And there we are. I think that'll do it. So we'll get ready for the students coming now.
I first said to him about the possibility of found foundations of what appeared to be the older church.
Much deeper than this.
Much deeper. We've had to back them because of...
Right, that's the mop brush then. Let's start by dropping the brush. Oh, thank you. The back's so bad I can't get over these days, that's it. Now we're going to use that limited palette. So you can see here, there's the ultramarine blue. The Prussian blue with a bit of brown is this darker colour, isn't it? And coming through to a bit more green here, so a bit more of the yellow ochre with the blue there, which will give us a green. Yellow and blue makes green. We're going to leave these lighter areas, so wet into wet coming here, put those fine lines in later. If you draw very heavily, the drawing marks will show through. So if you want to do that, it's a way, it's like pen and ink, you can actually do that. And if you want fine lines anywhere inside, well, you can get those in with a pencil. Or you can use that Trinograph pencil I mentioned to you to get real darks as well. So what I want to do is just get an effect of light at the moment and draw that effect of light and make it more and more detailed. So let's look at these subtle warms and cools. I've already dampened the paper, so I'm just going to take a little bit of my yellow ochre there, and we'll just start here. And now if I did dry brush, let's just dry this brush off. Dry brush would be just dragging over the surface like that. You see I can get that texture like that with the end of the brush. But this is just wet into wet, so I'm going to make myself a nice, quite quick little layer. These brushes haven't been used yet, so they're a bit... Now these are quite cheap. I've just got these off a new firm on eBay. So, you know, if you ever want to get materials, you have my email. You can write to me, where can we get these things from, Pete? And I'll tell you, you know, the addresses or where to get things from. Down into here, and I'm going to now link that. I'm going to paint wet next to wet. I'm going to come down with this cool here and let that blend one into another look and just tickle in some textures into there, coming across. Come right down with that cool, thin it down a bit. We can lift out paint whenever we want, so I can take a dry brush and I can lift that back take it out again. I'm working on the vertical, you won't be, you'll be working on the horizontal, I expect. Easels, this is a little sketching easel, but if we can just show them that one, can we? This is something called an easel, hard to get hold of now, but the SAA do one with a single. Just put it on your legs there, that's what can be. Yep. I've extended the legs out, and you see the legs will extend out there, push them forward, and it's very comfortable. You can just sit in your chair, and now you can see where the painting goes. Yep. And it's so light, it's just aluminium, so they're easy to handle. Just put them under your arm. All you need is a little three-legged stool or a deck chair. Worth thinking about. So the SAA, you can't get those ones anymore. I've got two of them, but you can get the ones with a single tripod. So for working out of doors on watercolours and simple smaller paintings, they're ideal. Or you start to get these wooden ones, which you can pick up for as cheap as £7. I've seen them about quite cheaply. These little wooden. You see, we've got wet into wet going on there to get that effect there. I want to go a little bit warmer and greener, so I'm going to take a little bit of my blue and add it with the yellow, and just make this like slightly greener. I'm not going to use my other colours. Just want to use these today. Now it's still wet, so if I use a bit of texturing, you see these marks here. Look. There's a bit of texturing coming across here, and because it's still wet, that's going to gradually link in. I'm using the brush, almost dry brush look, so we can get the, if you wanted to do grasses, in fact you could do grasses like that, couldn't you? By putting it like of a light. So we'll get a bit of texture going on. Now it's a bit warmer there, so I might want to use that big brush, or I might come back to a slightly smaller one. You can change brushes around as you want. Go to the burnt sienna, and I'm just going to tickle down. So there's little marks of the burnt sienna here, going down into the wall, and it's still damp. I'm going to use the side of that brush now, just to bring that down there, and so I can blend that in. Now if I want to soften an edge, I can either lift it out, or I can take some water, and I can let that blend in by putting water next to it. So we can blend by putting the brush with water and letting it blend one into another, or it blends in by its own weight. Get a bit softer down here, take my wash brush again. This is a bit darker here, so I'm going to take that colour I made earlier and come down there, all the way down, up, around here, down there. If you wanted, and you wanted to leave the paper slightly rougher, you can leave a rough edge like that. It's completely up to you. I'm just going to paint over fairly heavily, a bit more water. These brushes, now I'm trying them out, they're not quite as nice as my oval mop. They are cheaper, but they will work as a mop. Take some of that very light yellow ochre there and just let it come in ever so gently, almost into the pure white now, and we'll just tickle that out later. Just take my small brush and run down this line here. Now that's wet onto dry. Look at the hard edge we get. Quite different to the wet onto the wet. And if I come up and around there, I just realised I haven't drawn this part in, so I'm going to draw it in now with the paint. Right round and into there. Should be a bit lower actually, come down a bit more. Down to here. There we are. And I can just tickle in, wet into wet, that's still wet there. I get the soft edges, whereas here it's a hard edge. I can drop into that whenever I want. So I can take a little bit of that blue. I can tint this down by dropping in paint into it. Yeah. Wet into wet. So I'm working up my mid-tones first, gradually here. This is dry, so I can come across there and I can start painting in these little bits of the lattice work. And if I wanted to now, I could change to a much smaller brush, but now there's several ways of doing this. I'm not going to be very careful. I'm more of an impressionist, and I'm also very impatient, so I like to get things done. But if you make that point into a blade, so if I now press that into a blade, then obviously I can get a much finer line. You see? So don't just think you stay with the point of the brush. You can press your brush down around here. A bit of that coming down. My finger down there, getting that into a bit more texture. Look. But you can see the effects already. It's coming, isn't it? I mean, you know, it's so quick painting in watercolour like this. And this is still wet, so I want to go back with my wash brush. I've got to a lot darker yet. I'm now going to take some of the to make it a bit stronger. I'm going to take some burnt sienna on the blue again, go a little bit stronger, a bit more blue. Drop those colours in to get some texture here. I'm still using the brush very, very texturally. A bit more blue in that. And it gets greener down below here, very, very dark down there. Yellow ochre up here. How much darker I'm going now, tonally. If you want to see tone, squint. And your eyes will cut down the amount of light. If you squint at that now, you'll see the lights all tend to go into one. If you want to see more colour, open your eyes really wide. And it starts to go into, you can see the tones that you're getting, whether they're correct or not. So I'm painting wet into wet now, with a little bit of texturing as well, to get these effects. I can come back to any brush I want at any time, so if I want to go a bit more subtly there, get that yellow. Now this is wet on dry, but if I want to make it more subtle, I can go wet next to it and just blend it in, look. So you can lift it out, you can blend in. So I wanted to lift some out of here, I can take this brush and literally lift a bit out, look. So I can go darker and darker or lighter and lighter. I want to go darker still, so I'm going to take my brown brush now, and I'm going to take some of the Prussian blue now, which is a really dark. It's the one I go to for my darks, and add some burnt sienna to that. We'll really start to get some lovely darks going up here. I'm also using the paint a little more thickly. In other words, I'm putting more pigment into the paint. So not only can we paint the paint thinly, not only can we paint one colour over another, we can also, going down with paper, we can also paint a bit thicker with the pigment so that it becomes darker. I won't take too long on these, as I know you're just dying to get onto your own, I know. That very blue colour there, so let's take the pure blue here, and there's a shutter there of the window, and make that much, much bluer, which will then have an effect against the other. It's darker there, so I'm going to take that paint and make it much, much thicker, way thicker and quite warm. See how dark we can go. Now look at that, and the difference that makes. Up here it's still wet, I can tickle in up here and let the effects of wet into wet stone. We've got these lines of stone coming along here. You can see what I'm doing here, tickling down there, little edges of the stone here down to that corner. It's much darker behind there, I'm painting that dark in, it's warmer, so add a bit more burnt sienna down here, comes down to the edges here, little bits of stone and rock. You can even use a diffuser, you can use a fine spray to keep things wet if you want to as well. Come back up to the washes here, let's be a light blue, light brush. What I'm going to do quite deliberately here at the minute is take this square one, to just show you about this dry brush work. Let's take some of that light blue, get the brush working. This is a cheaper brush, it's one of the ones that are there on loan today. And a little touch of warmth into it, just to give it a slight purpley tint, not too much. And if I drag that across, look at that dry brush work, you see what I'm getting there? It'll just drag across to give me a texture on that surface here. Right down there, I'll use that to come down as well. So you can use the square brushes just as much as you can use the others. A bit bluer there, so let's have much more blue down here. It's way bluer. Going right through my window there. Don't worry if it trickles, I'm going to just drag it across in a moment. All of this is quite blue. I want more warmth into that sky, into the ceiling, so I can take this colour here again, and I can drop it back in while it's still wet. Now I'm making it those yellows coming down into there. So different brushes for different courses, and as I say, if I wanted to do something straight with this, like for instance if I take this brush now and I take some of that yellow ochre, I can come straight down there, look in one swoop, straight down that, touch a little bit of the burnt sienna on, and I can wet into wet, I can put that into here, just using the edge of the brush. It's a flat brush, we can use the edge of the brush, look, make these little bits on here. See how it's building up? Here again, it's quite strong, The floor wants to be stronger here as well. Let's put a bit more warmth, just tickle some of this warmth coming into here. It's quite warm behind there. Look, there's a sort of golden warmth behind there. So we'll just put a thin wash of this burnt sienna and yellow ochre. If you've got any questions while I'm doing this, do ask. If you know if you've got something coming up that I haven't covered, and you think, well, how do you do that, Peter? How do I get that effect? Don't be afraid to ask me while I'm wittering on. Otherwise, I just keep wittering and just give the effect, the illusion of these things behind. Using that brush just quite dry there. A little bit stronger, so a bit more red, just being dropped into some of these to give the illusion of things going on behind. Here's much stronger, isn't it? So let's, I'll start off with the blue there. Right the way across. Down. That's coming into here as well, it's quite strong there. Then I want to drop in the brown into that. And the yellow ochre into that in a moment. So I mix on the paper. You're not just mixing off the paper. Mix on it. I'll get this dark going in here. Where are we? That's it, all the way across there, down there. Whichever brush suits you best. Right, while that's drying a bit, let's come back. I use my brush just to lift some marks into that look, just lifting out, putting in at the same time. Let's look at the floor now. Again, the blue. Let's go back to my wash brush a minute. It'll be quite different when I do the landscape in a minute as well, so totally different effects. Let it flood and just enjoy it. And while that's flooding around there, let's get some of that blue on my smaller brush. Start to get the effects of light here. You see back there all right, Carol?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, you got your glasses on, have you?
I don't need it for distance, please. It's just up close.
Oh, right. And you can see I'm gradually building from my light tones to my mid tones. Down to that floor again. So I'm letting it dry back a bit, and it's timing. It really, you know, I can't teach you this bit. You've got to just practice and do it. Now that's fairly wet, but not so wet that if I put a colour in there, it shouldn't go spreading out next. Let's see if it does. Here we go. So that's a harder edge look. It's just damp, that edge. Now if I want to soften that out, take some clean water, and I can just blend that gently in to bring it out right to the edge there. And we've got an instant window which I can go over later and pick out a bit more if I want. Down the edge of this. Put little details in, the texture on the wall, you can do all of that, but that's wet on dry now. That was wet next to wet, wasn't just blending out. Back to the floor again. And let's get some warmth going there now. A little bit of blue into it. Don't want too much water, otherwise. Now don't go back to your paint each time and wash your brush and go back into the paint you've mixed, because it just makes it thinner and it gets wetter and wetter. Sometimes you put just the smallest amount of colour on, like that. I'll go straight to my blue, pick up a little bit of blue and put it in. But I didn't go back and wash off my brush. These paints are yours today, they're free, so you use what you want and enjoy. I could go to a smaller flat now and start putting in these individual tiles, couldn't I? But let's just work this up a bit. I'm just going to use the tip of the brush to give the feeling of these tiles. Get off, bee. And we'll just drag that outwards in perspective. put some details in a moment. Much warmer, much darker. Really starting to get some shadows in. Now we're starting to build up the shadows. Up here again. Much darker down here. A bit more yellow maybe. Into this. More water, thin it down a bit. Drop them in. And I've got the effect of light I was after. I don't need to do much more to get the effect of light now. What I will start to do now, I'll start to pick out the details. Having got the effect of light and all my light colours. So let's take some of the very darks now. We were saying it was Prussian blue and brown. And we'll really start to pick out things like this. See, I'm gradually building up darker and darker and darker. With the warms against the cools. We're nearly there. Enough to show you what I wanted to show you anyway. This is all I'm trying to do. On this one. And then if we wanted to use a fine brush, we could start to pick out these little bits of tiling on the floor. Blue, whatever they are. So I'm going to let this one dry off in a minute while I start on the other one so that I can get that masking fluid off afterwards. But you see what I mean about the limited palette? It doesn't take many colours, does it? You know, it's only those four colours I'm using. I'm playing between the two different blues and the yellows and the warms. You can have a lovely atmospheric effect in there, on the surfaces. I'm going to stop at that one there just because you've seen how it can be done. You can see the colours coming, you can see the way it's being done. So rip that one off quickly and turn it round, and then I'll come back to finish it after I've worked on this one. And we'll take when it's dry, I can take the masking fluid off to show you. Right, so straight on to my other photo, which is way under here. Nice sunny day. Unlike today's grey day. So a completely different palette, absolutely different palette. And I'm going to now use the brighter colours. And what I was saying to you about starting with the lightest colours. So quite different, just to give you an idea of colours. We need to start with the whites, which I've already done with the masking fluid, okay? We need to look at these light areas like that, the dog. Right, the masking fluid has done those, but all of these light yellows haven't been done yet. So I'm going to do my sky first. And let's do a graduated wash. So well, you can even turn it upside down, because what happened is the water will come down to here and form a layer, but I could paint this upside down and let the sky dry and then put it back upwards, and we wouldn't have that happening, would we? Wouldn't be dropping that way. So I want to have a lighter colour here and a darker colour here. I've got a beautiful, I love this, I've got a lovely cerulean blue here. Let's bring that down right the way around here. So straight in with it. I'm not even going to, you can wet the whole piece of paper and drop in for a sky. I'm just going to come straight in with this lovely cerulean blue and then work my way upwards in this case rather than downwards. It comes to the tree a bit here. I'm going to go a bit stronger and take some cobalt, and you see how that's going to come down there. If I wanted cloud effects, I could start to do that and it would blend one into another right up to the top there. Let's go a bit stronger still. I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine up here now, and that will be a graduated, just get it right the way down and just let it blend. Because I'm working on the vertical, it's going to come all the way down. These brushes, they're a little bit not as soft as I'd like. I'd like them to be, they're splitting a little bit at the end, so they're giving me this lined effect, which I don't really want. Right, dry that brush off, and now just blend that all the way down, and we should get a nice blending, a graduated wash all the way down to the horizon there. But so these brushes are doing that a bit much. They're breaking up, which my mop wouldn't do, but I'll carry on with it. Carry on with it for the moment. Put a bit more of that cerulean into there, and it'll all blend out. Right, next, the Aureolin yellow. So it's a lovely lemon yellow, which is very transparent look. Lovely lemon yellow, right up into the tree here. And it can go with most of the painting, wherever I want these yellow effects, it can go with most of it. Right through. Even through here, wherever you've got this light yellow colour. So Aureolin yellow, a lovely transparent yellow. Can come all the way. I can give it a wash. Actually, give the whole thing a wash of it because I'm going to need a lot of this yellow in here. And I can drop. Now we know that green is made from blue and yellow, so I can actually drop yellow into this, blue into this colour. And this is a much warmer yellow there. So we go back to my yellow ochre, and I'll just put that in the yellow ochre. I might use my other brush quite a bit there. But see how much warmer that yellow is to the lemon yellow. Now I can start to make things stronger. I'll take a bit more of that lemon yellow. I want it a bit stronger up here. It's still, because it's very wet, it's flooding down the paper. If you're working flat, you'll find this easier. But the difference in these colours, completely different scene. This will come into its own in a minute because it's breaking up. It's quite nice for doing grasses, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Right, we know it's cooler in the background. These blues and so on are cooler, greens are cooler in the background. Let's start to, I don't want it coming down into that roof, so I'll have to wait, it's just a fraction for it to dry a bit more, but we'll go back. We've got some sap green here as well. Now you've also got Viridium. Sap green is a much warmer green. So if I just, while it's wet, look, I'm just going to drop those in, just stipple it, and they will spread out because it's still wet, giving me that lovely soft effect of the leaves. Same over here, I can work this up into the background a bit. I can put more blue into the background, so I'm going to put a bit more blue with that, maybe a touch of ultramarine into there, and it's a lot darker. I can just stipple those, letting the light colours show through. Don't want it coming into that roof, just letting those light colours show through because it's still damp. But a lot of this is knowing what watercolour will do, so for some of you it might be a bit of a mess, but right, now a bit stronger with that yellow again. It's a lot stronger here with that yellow that I want. I'm going to let that go a bit stronger there and then let it dry down a bit. Before I come back right down through. Now the green's down here. So I've mixed a bit more blue with my green now, and I'm going darker into here. And I'm starting to texture. It's still damp, but you can see it's drying out. And as it's drying out, we're getting harder edges, so I'm getting the effects of the grass all the way down, using the brush much more dryly, but letting those yellows just glow through. Much darker up here, so a bit more. I'm going to put a bit of chrome yellow in now. Chrome yellows are quite warm yellow, and it's less transparent. Are you okay over there? Yep, good. Getting a bit damp on the bum, is it, down there? There we go. So be careful you don't lose it too much, otherwise you'll lose all your lights. If this dribbles too much, all your lights just disappear, so I don't want to overdo that. Going down through. It's still wet, and if it was getting too dry, we need to either wet it again or spray it. But let's just bring these bits of texturing down, gradually getting lighter and lighter and lighter. Come down in little lines here past the dog, down to here. Now that's quite dark there, so let's take a really lovely dark green. I'll take some of that Prussian blue and some of the green. And it's a little bit warmer. I'll add a little bit of sienna to that, burnt sienna to that, just to warm it up a bit. I've got grass mixing in with it now. We'll go really lovely and dark there now, letting those lights show through as it comes through into here. It's knowing how dry it is and how far these colours are going to go. Let's put a few little bits of dark into there. You see how it's going from light to darker gradually. Into the background here, a little bit of those darks, but a bit bluer in the background at the moment. I'll just let those soften in. It's dark against, the leaves are dark against the sky there. And down. That's spreading a bit too much, so I let that dry a bit more now. But here I can afford to be very dark because I want it really dark down into there. I've got lots of masking fluid there. Remember, all these white flowers are masking fluid, yeah? Don't forget that's what I'm doing. So don't think I've lost those flowers totally, I haven't. Really get some darks into there now. Going down into the shadow here of the dog. and we'll carry on these darks to the grasses. I seem a bit mad at first, but we're making an effective light. Back to the green. So don't worry too much. If you make a mistake, you can lift out. And onto that I need to get the blue again. So let's take my bit of cobalt there. Get the effective light of that. Pretty colours. Getting darker and darker. Get the effects of light. So I can go dark on top here. If I want a bunch of leaves like that, I can go around them with the shadow, leaving them standing out. And we start to get the effect of the leaves by painting in the negative shapes. Comes right out to there. Building up these textures. And we'll turn this over in a minute, go back to the other one and finish the other one off, then we'll come back to this one and bit by bit by bit. It's starting to look something like that. I think you've all done very well. Have you enjoyed it today?
Yes, it's been lovely.
So, I mean, would you want to come back for an acrylic day, say? Yeah. We've talked about doing an oil or acrylic. We could do an acrylic, couldn't we, here? Yeah. Be a bit different.
That's good. That'd be fun.
Well, that's it then. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great.